Welcome to our first episode of Run to the Hills, and we're really excited to be able to be sharing this with you. Now, we'd love over this episode and future episodes for you to contact us. If you'd like to leave a comment in the show notes below, then that would be great and we'll pick those up. You can also email us on runtothehills@cheercharge.co.uk, or we're on Twitter at runtothehills. JK, and also on Instagram, Run to the Hills JK. We've also got a Facebook page, Run to the Hills, and all these links will be on the show notes below, so please contact us. And if you enjoy the show, please subscribe and click the notifications and also the like button. So without further ado, on to our first episode. So this episode is all about the North Down Way 100, and in these episodes we want to review a race that has just happened. We'll also have some great interviews with people, so it'll be a mixture and we hope that you really enjoy it. So this first one is about the North Down Way 100. The actual race is 103 miles, there's 10,000 feet of climb. And I thought, Edwina, can you just tell us a little bit about what the route is like and what the event is like, please?
Well, Centurion are famous for putting on really great, well-supported ultra events in the south of England, and this is one of them. I think they run 10 now along the North Downs Way, and it runs from Farnham to Ashford. It's a mixture of single-track trail, wider trail, a bit of hard-pack track, and a little bit of road. And the thing I think most people will say about the North Downs Way is that it is relentlessly undulating. The North Downs Way, it's short and sharp, little climbs up and down, and very rooty. So it's not technical in a mountain sense, but in the way that you have to keep on your toes all the time. And after 10, 11 hours of running and into the night, it's a hard route to run, whatever the weather. And as we're going to find out, the weather was the main factor that played into this race.
Excellent, thank you very much. And we've got various interviews coming up, and the first one is with the Race Director James Elson. And I spoke to James on Tuesday night and I asked him three main questions. I wanted to know how he prepared for the race as the race organiser, particularly post-lockdown, how the weekend went, particularly with the volunteers and the runners, and also just some of the lessons that he learned from putting on this race. So this next interview is with Race Director James Elson. So thank you so much, James, for joining us tonight, and really keen to get your perspective on the weekend and how it all went. Particularly, I think a lot of people listening, watching this, will be thinking about just what is it like post lockdown and these races. So maybe first of all you can tell us a little bit about your preparation and how different it was preparing for this race compared to a normal Centurion race.
Yeah, sure, John. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, very, very different. Much more stressful. Mainly around just having to negotiate with landlords, working with the national trails, with UK Athletics to make sure we had the permit and our insurance, and making sure that the general infrastructure of the race, which is usually quite straightforward, was in place, and reassuring them all that we were going to do what we'd set out in the protocol. So obviously the main consideration was making sure we created what we called like a COVID secure environment. So we completely changed the start and the checkpoints. The rest of the race remained pretty much the same. We spread the runners out over 2 hours from the beginning, so they started between 5 and 7 a.m. instead of at 6 o'clock in a mass start. We asked the faster ones to go first, so it kind of spread the field the greatest possible amount right from the gun. And then at the checkpoints, we split them into 3 mini checkpoints. So they'd come in, they'd sanitize their hands, and then they'd come into one of the mini checkpoints and serve themselves, and then the volunteers in PPE would keep those stocked up. Apart from that, the usual preparations went into it in terms of the marking, the sweeping, the volunteer, and the logistic sides. But the PPE side of things was difficult. There was a lot of going on, a lot of stuff to buy and make sure we provided. And then ultimately, John, as always with these races, communication. telling the volunteers and the runners exactly what to expect, exactly what was different, and exactly how we needed them to kind of go about race days for it to be safe.
So had you briefed the runners before, rather than having get all the runners together and talk to them? Had you already briefed them either by video or by communication?
Yeah, so for the first time ever, we sent big numbers out in the post, and runners were sent a video link to me. I did a YouTube video race briefing. They could still come to registration and collect a bib if they forgot it, or use the toilet, or leave their drop bags. But if not, they could just come straight to the start, have the temperature taken, and then rolling start, just get out on course as soon as they were ready. So yeah, we did remote briefing. It was a bit unusual, and I went on longer than I would in person, but it did seem to convey what we needed. They got a lot of information to take in, the runners, probably too much, but I kept saying to them, I wouldn't be telling you this if we didn't think it was important, so please take the time to read it all.
Yeah, and I've read your race report, James, and I'll put a link on the podcast and on the YouTube channel so people can read that. But
thanks.
At the weekend itself, you obviously were really thanking the volunteers and the runners. So maybe you could just explain, just the importance of the volunteers and how the runners responded.
Yeah, I mean, so you're probably aware, but the temperatures at the weekend were exceptionally high. It hit 33 degrees on Saturday afternoon. We'd asked the volunteers to be in PPE the whole time, so nitrile gloves and face masks, even if they were outside, because they were in and around a checkpoint with lots of people coming and going. We just needed to just basically, from a perception point of view as much as a safety point of view, make sure everyone felt safe. So that was a really, really hard shift for some of them. The overnight guys, they're at their checkpoint for 15 hours, in PPE the whole time. And I was sweeping the course at 2-3 in the morning, turning up to aid stations unannounced, and volunteers there, all in PPE, observing everything we'd asked. It was just unbelievable. As for the runners, you know how you get fuzzy brain, especially when you're dehydrated and it's 30 degrees, but they were doing everything they could to be conscientious. You'd expect that from our community, the ultra community, but it really was something to behold. Everyone went above and beyond. I think we all felt a collective responsibility to do the right thing for the sport. We're one of the first events back. Let's set a good example and a template for going forward, so that we did feel some responsibility for that, somewhat of our putting our head on the chopping block. And in the end, the feedback from everybody post-race has been, I've asked them, did you feel safe? Was it, and all unanimously, yes. So from that perspective, we achieved something, I think. Yeah.
And I think the good thing as well, you said in the report that the runners responded well, because again, we know what it's like sometimes when you're 60, 70 miles into a race and something's not there, you can get a bit crabby, can't you? But from what you were saying, runners were great, weren't they?
They were great. We had a slightly restricted menu. They were obviously having to fill bottles themselves at the first couple of checkpoints. No matter how quick we tried to get people through the 3 checkpoints, and however spread out they were, there were some queues. We had the worst queue we had was 5 minutes at checkpoint 1, so not too bad, but nevertheless not ideal. And that's something we learned that we can fix for next time. But nobody complained. Nobody whinged. Nobody complained about having to put a face mask on when they came inside. They just got on with it. I think the other factor here, John, was there was a time trial format, obviously, so the racing component was missing for some, and therefore it had a different dynamic, because you were running with and around people you just didn't know it started before or after you. So they had to get on with that as well. It was a new format for some of them. Not different, not necessarily bad, but not what they'd initially signed up for. So we had to ask them to take a leap of faith and trust us, really. And I think it paid off. Everybody seemed to have a great weekend, irrespective of the horrendous temperatures.
In this episode, we've interviewed the winners of the male race and the female race, and a couple of other people further down the field. But from your perspective, I see that there was quite a high dropout rate, wasn't there? Obviously, the heat was a big part of that. But can you just tell us a little bit about how the race went in the sense of people performing?
Yeah, I mean, so we asked the faster runners to go first, and they generally did. Within the first half an hour, all the eventual front runners had started. We saw extremely slow times compared to normal right through checkpoint 1, 2, 3. You know, like I'm talking tens of minutes off what we'd usually expect. And some really good runners in there. Melissa Venables, who I know you got on the show, obviously is past British 100k champion, having to go at her first 100 miler. Pete Windross has won the Thames Path before. He was out running, you know, in the men's field. And Juhana, who obviously went on to win, was solid from the start. But the havoc being wreaked right through the field was awful. Like from the first 6 hours weren't too bad. There was a bit of a breeze and the cloud shielded the sun. But about 1 o'clock, the sun came out and it was incredibly intense. And we saw, in the end, we saw 54% of the field drop out, which is a third highest dropout rate we've ever had, behind one of our very early hundreds on a flooded course, and Wendover Woods 100, which was a very hard race. So tremendous dropout rate. Winning times were miles off course records for obvious reasons. And eventually only 17 100-mile one-day buckles handed out, which is the lowest percentage we've ever given handed out of those buckles. So all in all, loads of records, none of them good. But something for those that persevered, a true sense of achievement for sure, for getting through it. It was a tough race on what is already a tough course.
Yeah. No, and I think it'll be one of those races that people will look back on, won't it? Oh, do you remember that year, 2020, the heat and the lockdown? So I think it'll go into the epics, won't it?
It will do.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Well, again, I think on behalf of the running community, we want to thank you for putting this on. I think it would have been easy to have said, oh, let's just wait. But really appreciate the fact that you put it on, and I'm sure there was some runners not thanking you as they were halfway through in the heat. But it was great to do that. Also wanted just maybe as you reflect on the weekend, this is now Tuesday evening, so are there big lessons that you feel you learned as a race director, as a team, as you go forward? I know your next event is in a few weeks' time, the Thames Path on the 5th of September. So are there big lessons that you're going to take forward?
I was really happy with the way the start worked. We trusted runners to self-seed, and that, by and large, that was good. The checkpoint dynamic as a template worked, but one thing that we found was that the queues were building up because of runners filling bottles, not because of the food element. So by splitting the food and the fluid out further, so creating a different flow of runners through the checkpoint and releasing more water top-up facilities, we can, I think, pretty much eliminate the queues entirely. Apart from that, it just reinforced for me that if you give people good information and they feel empowered on the day, both runners and volunteers, that they will, they will respond well to that. And that's something we kind of knew already, but this took it to a different level. So I hope this year gets incrementally easier in terms of fighting battles. For example, my permit situation for North Downs 100 was really difficult. One of the first events to have a UK Athletics permit, but the others are already now all approved. So that's one big battle that now doesn't exist. But of course, we're just going to have to be dynamic around any local lockdowns, anything else that happens, John. But so I wouldn't say major lessons, but just minor improvements that could change a lot of things, a lot of people's race weekend for the better. Yeah.
And have you got more numbers for the Thames Path?
No, what we're seeing is that the international athletes generally aren't travelling now because they're having to quarantine on entry, and obviously we're just letting them defer because that's not fair on them. So we're losing probably 5 to 10% of the fields to international runners, but by and large, the events were sold out anyway from late last year, and the numbers are less than last year because the attrition rate's been higher in cancellation terms, but not tremendously so, and I'm actually quite happy about that. I'd happily have 10 to 20% lower starting numbers. It makes it more manageable for us because of the extra, protocols we've got in place. So 240 to 250, very slightly bigger, but not massive in comparison, no.
Great. And again, just want to thank you for tonight and just for sharing your thoughts. And thank you for your support to Run to the Hills. I spoke to you a few weeks ago about the possibility of doing this, and you've been very supportive. So thank you very much. And I look forward to chatting to you again at different events over the next few weeks and months. And again, just congratulations on putting on a great event. And thank you on behalf of the ultra running community.
Thanks, John. It's been great speaking to you again. Thanks very much.
Thanks. Well, I hope you really enjoyed that interview with James. It was great to chat with him. And Edwina, he's been really supportive of our podcast and for the YouTube channel. And I know that you're a good friend of James, aren't you?
Now I've known James now. It was actually about 10 years ago I first met him on the ultra scene, and Centurion was one of the first ultra races that I did. And I know I speak for everybody when we can't thank James and the Centurion team enough for having the courage to put this race back on. I know it took a lot of planning.
Our next interviews are with the male winner and the female winner. So again, on Tuesday evening, I spoke to Juhana Kirk and to Melissa Venables. And I wanted to know three main things from them. First of all, how did they prepare physically and mentally for this race? How did the race go? And how did they find the time trial format at the sharp end of the race? And they both gave great answers, and I hope you enjoy these interviews. So I'll play these back to back. So it'll be Juhana and then Melissa. Anna, you've got the privilege of being the first winner of our series of Run to the Hills. This is a new episode, and so we're looking forward to having winners regularly on this podcast and this YouTube channel. And so you're the first. So thank you so much for coming along. And this last weekend, you won the North Downs Way in 19 hours 33:27. So congratulations. And just first of all, how are you feeling? This is Tuesday evening. So are you recovering okay?
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. I'm feeling great. I'm still feeling very. It's taken a little while to all settle in. It was a pretty heavy day all in, but overall physically, I'm feeling pretty good. It's Tuesday now, so I've had a couple of days recovery. Although I've been back to work a lot sooner than I hoped to. Yeah. But the legs are okay, more or less. I haven't really done any running as yet. I'm in no hurry to do that, I think. But yeah, it's pretty amazing. Yeah, feel very good.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. And I thought it'd be interesting just to find out your preparation for the race, not just physically, because obviously that's a big aspect of preparing for a 100-mile race, but also mentally, particularly going into this race, knowing that it was going to be a bit different to the normal Centurion races. So just give us a little sense of your preparation, please.
Physically, I've been training for a while with a coach now. It's coming up to a year. Kim Collison, he's been coaching me. Yeah. So I'm definitely in the best form I've ever been in. I've had sort of mixed results before. I've done quite well with sort of faster, shorter distances before. This would be my fifth attempt at 100, but this was my third successful completion of 100. Going into the North Downs Way, it's actually my third attempt at it. So third year on the trot. 2 years ago, I attempted it, and I had a knee injury that I wasn't sure how it would go. So I dropped at about mile 44, I think it was. And last year, it was quite hot again, and I had more or less the same stomach issues I had this year. So I dropped again just before halfway. So this year, I was very determined to finish, and being in the form that I was very positive. Actually, I was feeling good, and I've had a few races cancelled this year already due to COVID-19. So this was the first proper race I was going to get to. So I've been training for a long time, and I was keen to get out there and see how I'd perform. Really, yeah. So mentally, I was in a good place. The heat was not welcome, but it's just one of those things you've got to deal with on the day. Yeah. I had a great crew who really took care of me. I did suffer a lot in the heat. Like as you mentioned, I had some stomach issues. I was quite sick at about mile 33. And I couldn't really eat a great deal of solid food thereafter, so I had to sort of rely on energy gels and things, which I don't often do, but it got me round.
Yeah. Well, let's just think about the race a little bit then, because I know, let's take that up until you had the stomach issues, so the first 35 miles or so. Did it go to plan? Did you have a definite split that you were aiming for? Were you looking around to see where others were? Just give us a sense of your plan for that first section.
The plan for the first section, I generally run to feel. I don't check my splits too much. It's pretty up and down, so but I was very aware that it would get very hot later, so I wasn't going out fast, but I was going out comfortably, making the most of the cooler weather. So I think the earlier start worked in my benefit, and I think James had asked the faster runners to set off between 5:30, so I set off at about 5:15 or thereabouts, because I didn't want to go out alone. I knew it would be probably quite a lonely race anyway, because you spread out quite quickly. So I think there was quite a few ahead of me. I didn't know what position I was until I started seeing my crew later on. I was aware I was sort of second or third, I believe, for quite a while. And I was just sort of keeping comfortable, but clipping along nicely. Kim had said, respect the heat and don't go out too hard. But I've never really had a problem with that, going out too hard. But
I did see your splits, and they were, for the first section, it was 8:23 pace and 8:04 pace. So that looked to be fairly quick to me, but that comfortable, is it?
It's kind of comfortable, yeah. Yeah, I guess, yeah. For me, it wasn't too bad. I felt very good.
Yeah.
But I was aware it would get very hot later. So, if you can get miles in the bag without overexerting, it's definitely...
Yeah. And I suppose starting at 5 o'clock, it is going to be a bit cooler then, isn't it? But once you've been going 3 or 4 hours and it gets to 9, 10 o'clock, then it is going to heat up, isn't it?
Yeah, we were lucky there was cloud cover a lot longer than I thought. I'd been checking the weather all the day before and again that morning, and it looked like it was going to... no clouds. It looked like it was going to be full sunlight from about 10, but actually it didn't happen till about midday, I believe. So, when you're running, you don't. It feels a lot hotter standing around.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. But
yeah,
there is tree cover as well, so it's not like the South Downs.
Yeah. And then tell us a bit then about how you felt. You were saying you had a few issues with nutrition. Has that been a problem in previous races, or was that to do with the heat?
I think that was to do with the heat. It happened almost exactly the same mileage last year as well. So I always try and eat solid food as long as I can. And I was having electrolytes and everything, and I just started feeling a bit queasy. Had some stomach cramps, and then I was physically sick a couple of times. And after that, I couldn't really face any food. It was probably the heat. I was very careful. Sunscreen and a cap and everything, but on a day like that, something's out of your hand. But
Now I read the race report that James Elson just put on, and he was saying that Peter Windross was ahead of you for quite a while, wasn't he? But I think he also really suffered in the heat. Did you see him at any point? Because you went into first place after Rotham. According to the stats there. No, I think you were second. Yeah. No, maybe a little bit later. I think your chip position, you were first, but you were probably still second at that point. So did you see Peter or the others that were ahead of you?
I came into Rotham, and my crew and also the aid station said that the previous guy has just left.
Right.
But he's not in a good shape. And I was like, that sounds promising. Not that I was in great shape. Not that I was in great shape at all. But they said he'd laid down and he was suffering.
Okay.
And but he seemed to be maintaining that gap quite well. And it was after I got to Bluebell Hill, and again the aid station said, "Oh, he's in a really bad shape. He's sort of shuffling along." And then it took another hour. I can't remember. It was some point thereafter, and I caught him at the bottom of the hill just before Detling, and he was walking, and I stopped and said, "Is everything okay?" And he said, "No, he's not in good shape." He said his kidneys, he couldn't take anything on, but he was, so he wasn't in a good way, and he said he was going to drop. So without sounding overconfident, after Bluebell Hill, I thought I'd catch him because I still had sort of 20 miles or so.
Yeah.
So I was hoping I would catch him. It's not the best way to win, but we had a good race. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's one of the great things about ultra running, though, isn't it? Because we are competitive, and whether it's at the front end like you are, or whether it's for 50th place, there's that competition with your friends and people around you. But there's also a real sense of looking after each other, isn't there? And and that's not uncommon for you to check he's okay and to make sure that he's all right.
Yeah. No, I offered him drinks and food, and he said no. He was going to drop. So yeah.
And then presumably, did you have quite a big lead on who was going to be second place then? Were you well ahead?
I wasn't checking at all. My crew later told me they weren't informing me of anything, but I read James's report as well. But allegedly at that point I had about 40 minutes.
Okay.
Which was, I think it was, I would have felt very comfortable with that. But I saw my crew last just after the Dirty Habit pub, which is, I can't quite remember, but there wasn't long to go, and my crew Scott, he gave me a stern look, and he said he's closed down to about 26 minutes, and that was it. So my last few miles, I was really emptying the tank.
Right. Because
also I believe, I knew he had set off before me. After me.
Okay.
So my chip position was irrelevant in that sense because I didn't know how long after me he'd set off.
Yeah.
So,
because presumably that would have been quite interesting if you'd have finished first, but you started 10 minutes in front of someone and they finished 5 minutes behind you. They would actually win the race, wouldn't they? So I suppose you don't quite know, do you, until they've come in?
Well, I crossed the line in the stadium, and everyone was sort of congratulating me, and I was like, "Well, where is he? What's his time?"
Yeah.
And then I was speaking to Nikki, and she said, "Yeah, I can't give you the trophy until we know for sure that he's not going to come in." So I had to stand around for a little while, and it was all a bit nail biting. But yeah, the longer it went on, I felt more and more comfortable. And then she said, "Indeed, you have won." So.
Yeah.
But it's quite, it brings another dimension to the race. It's quite good.
Yeah.
And,
so I was going to ask that sense of almost like a time trial within a race. So how did that affect the way you ran and the way you performed?
Again, I mean, I had this determination to finish. That was my first goal, just to finish. Second goal, obviously, is to finish as well as you can. And when it looked like things were going to go well, it didn't really affect my performance up until the end, where I really had to push it. But it was nice, It just means you're running, and rather than knowing that there's two people still ahead of you, you don't know quite where you are. You can perhaps enjoy it a bit more.
Yeah.
And the start was really pleasant, actually, because obviously James had asked for no big groups larger than 6. There was quite a few people that went off sort of as soon as they could after 5 a.m. But I waited around till about 5:15, and I actually left alone, and I didn't see anyone for 15-20 minutes, and then sort of dribs and drabs later thereon.
Yeah.
But I don't think there were a huge amount ahead of me, but I did pass a few. But a lot of the time was spent on my own. But I quite enjoy that,
Yeah. And I think this is going to be the new norm for a while, isn't it? I think all the races for the next few months that go ahead will have a similar staggered start and a time trial aspect. And I think we'll get used to them, won't we? And it'll be, as you said, there'll be advantages to it, and there's probably some disadvantages. But if we take the positives, then that's a good thing, isn't it?
And I think the mass starts, they're always a bit hectic, and you, more often than not, you do set off a bit faster than you probably intend to, because you've got people around you and you're keeping up here and there, and a bit of pride.
Yeah.
You don't too many places. So, but I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Well, once again, congratulations, and that was really interesting just to get your take on the race. And thanks for being our first winner on Run to the Hills, so that's great. And then maybe just to finish with, you could tell us what your plans are for the rest of the year. Have you got any more races that you've got lined up?
The rest of the year, I've had a few races cancelled. Obviously, I was due to go to Madeira Island Ultra Trail in April. It was, so that was my first race, which was cancelled. I was due to race in the Ultra Trail Snowdonia, Mike Jones's new Apex running race, but that looks like it's cancelled. It's cancelled to the public anyway, and I think he's doing it for just a select field of invitation-only athletes and pros. So who knows, after this I might get invited.
I hope so.
Unlikely.
Yeah.
Very unlikely. So beyond that, I've got Lakes in a Day in November, I think it is. But I'm quite looking forward to a rest. If I don't get into the Ultra Trail Snowdonia, then I'll probably have a bit of a break, because I've been training for a whole year now, quite hard.
Yeah. And have you got any big targets for next year, or is that top secret?
Well, Madeira Island, I've rolled over to that, so I have to start training at some point again.
Yeah,
I've got that, and I had the Berlin Marathon. I was entered into that this September, and I've deferred that till next year. But no big races really. If I don't do the UTS, I'll have to do that next year, because like the North Downs Way, if I've booked something once and not completed, I'll keep trying.
Yeah. Well, we wish you all the best, and we look forward to following your progress on those races. And again, thanks for coming on this show and sharing your thoughts about the race. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Cheers.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Melissa. And you won the ladies' race of the North Downs Way 100 in a time of 21 hours 42:49. So first of all, how are you feeling? It's now Tuesday evening. Are you recovering okay?
So this evening I'm actually walking without it being too painful. So that's good. My feet are still not great, and I've got a lot of chafing, but I would say today I feel much more human. Yeah.
Well done, and congratulations on behalf of Run to the Hills for your victory, and we're looking forward just to finding out a bit more about it and how it went. Now, I've got your stats up here from DUV Statistics, and you've done quite a few ultras, but a lot of 100Ks, but not. This was your first 100-miler, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. So bit of the unknown for me. I've done other distances. So I've done 12-hour track, which I think I ran about 82 miles at. And then I've had a couple of races which were longer races that I've actually pulled up for injury. So I pulled up at GUCR last year at 86 miles and had to pull up at the Ridgeway at about 74 miles. So I've never quite completed the big trail runs that I've entered yet. So this was my first non-DNF for a long trail race. So
Well done. So I thought, first of all, just find out a little bit about your preparation, both physically preparing for a 100-mile race, but also particularly mentally for this race, because obviously it was going to be very different to other races that we've done in the past, post-lockdown, and just the staggered starts and everything. So maybe you could just tell us a little bit about your preparation physically and mentally, please.
So in terms of sort of physical training, I don't do huge mileage. So my average mileage, I'm probably at about 75, 80 miles when I'm training for something like this. Part of that is to do with my job, and just it's quite a stressful job, and I think it takes an impact. So my training plan might have slightly more, but if I feel that life isn't letting me do that, then I might step back a little bit. So I would say average mileage, I was looking about 75 to 80 weeks in the lead up to it. For me, it's the long runs that give me that confidence. So I was doing a decent number of long runs at weekends, and then some faster stuff midweek, sort of 14 miles of speed thrown in, and then my other mileage within that. So I tend to find I can't fit any more than that in really on a week to week basis with my job. So I tried to do a lot of my long runs on the hills, whether it was the Ridgeway, which is more local, or closer to the time I recce'd the whole of the North Downs Way. So use those as my training runs, because I think although it was really, really well marked, I think if you know where you're going, or you've at least done that route, it makes a huge difference to sort of your mental preparation, but also just that kind of, it takes away that element of always having to think, am I going the right way or the wrong way, or but it also in training and doing those training runs on that terrain, you're getting yourself used to the terrain. So that was kind of my physical, sort of the physical training, but also about kit and making sure that my race vest was okay and that I could get the drinks that I needed and my fuel out from where I needed it. So I used a lot of my training runs for that as well. In terms of mental preparation, I think it's been really hard because no one knew for a while whether your race was going to be cancelled or not cancelled, and I don't think I was that bothered about the changes in sort of how the race was going to run because I've not done this race before, so it was a bit of suck it and see. I don't think I wasn't too bothered about the staggered start or sort of how the checkpoints are going to run, because for me, I think my job is to turn up and run. And just follow the instructions. With COVID, it's about following the instructions of what you need to do to keep yourself and others safe. But the organisation of checkpoints is not down to me. That's down to the race organisers. So yeah, I don't think that particularly impacted on my sort of focus for the race. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. No, it's interesting. I think the way you approached it obviously worked for you, and it was really good. I've got your looking at your splits positions for checkpoint, and I must admit I love the stats. I love looking at how people have done in relation to the field, and I think the thing that really stands out with your performance is your overall position. Because after checkpoint 2 at Box Hill, you were 40th. That's overall. You were in second place as the lady, but you finished 6th overall, and obviously first lady. And that just tells me so much that you paced it well. Is that how it felt? Did you feel as though you were always in control of the race?
I think so. The North Downs Way is, well, it's 103 miles the course. But it's such a mixed terrain, so it is so hard to. So for me, my 100Ks have been typically flat routes on the track, and just my I suppose my strength is pacing, and so I can run 100K and have every mile pretty much within 10 seconds of itself. So that's for me. That's how I run, and I tend to run slightly on a negative split. So with the North Downs Way, you can't do that. You cannot say I'm going to run every mile at this. And I'd set myself 3 target times, because I didn't want to be disappointed. And a big race like that, when you've trained hard, if you only have one target and you don't hit it, you tend to sort of dwell on the negative side of it. So I had 3 times in mind. So I had 20 out, sub 20. Which I think, if it wasn't so hot and if we didn't have COVID, which made it a little bit difficult through checkpoints because you had to do all your own drinks and you gel before doing your drinks, but then trying to open sachets with slippery gelled hands is really, really tricky. So I think it took a little bit longer through checkpoints because you didn't have any help, and also the longer you stop, the harder it is to get started. So I think that impacted slightly. So I had 20 hours, 22 hours and 24 hours. And I knew early on that I wasn't going to make 20 hours. I knew the conditions weren't right for it, and to push for it would have been silly. So I kind of let that go and sort of set myself on, okay, let's get the job done. Let's do 22 hours if I can. And once I knew I was in the lead, it was also, for me, it was about actually racing, not racing, because I don't believe you can race 100 miles. I think you have to go into it, run your best race, and if it's good enough on the day, it'll be good enough. So if someone turns up and they're better and they get their fueling right and they have a better day, then your best might not be good enough. So I don't think you can actually race, but I was really conscious of where the other ladies were and where I was in the field, and just kind of trying to keep that there. But I think as I was working my way up the field overall, I kind of felt that my ladies' lead was getting safer and safer. So that was kind of that little bit of reassurance. So I think, yes, I paced it right, but not. Like I said, it's really hard to pace it. So I had really tough times where I wanted to quit. I had times where I felt I was really struggling. but I think the latter stages I felt more in control and I knew I could finish. So it was early on. So my toughest time was around 30-40 miles actually, because I just felt it was such a long way to go, and I was telling myself at 40 miles it's only 100k to go. 100k is your specialty. It's 100k, you can run 100k. Get to 40 miles, you can run 100k, you're good at it. So it's kind of you have to do whatever trickery with your mind that works for you really. And mine was telling me that 100k is easy. But, you know, on the trail, on the road, 100k I can run in 8.5 hours. On the trail, it's so much longer.
Yeah,
it feels long.
Yeah. So you were saying there, Melissa, that you had some low times and some tough times, and you used some sort of mental things to get you through those. Gave yourself some goals. Was there any other big lessons that you learned about finishing a 100-mile race that will help you for the future? Do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I've not done this race before. I know my nemesis is fueling. I know that. I know I am rubbish at eating. I've tried in my training, but I haven't tried hard enough. I think I need to spend more time training my gut to actually tolerate food. So my fueling strategy was really well planned out. I had planned calories, carbs, with a mix of drinks, food, and a few gels, and I was relying heavily on carb drinks, and in that weather I got to about 60 miles, and I'd managed it up to 60 miles actually, but at 60 miles I just wanted to drink water. I didn't want any more carb drinks, and I think looking back I probably would have put more gels in so I could have relied less on the carb drinks. I don't think I would necessarily increase my solid food intake because I know I struggle with that, but I think one of my biggest lessons is that I was getting lows, eating, feeling great again, getting low. I was never really consistently staying on top of it, which is, although I was managing it, and I obviously managed it okay because I got to finish and I managed a reasonable time and I won. But actually it would have been much better if I could have kept that consistency, and that I think I need to work on. But I always knew I could run 100 miles, but for me it was always going to be whether I could get the fueling right to run a good 100 miles, and to enjoy it.
And I think, reading race reports and talking to James, I interviewed James Elson, and he was saying that the amount of people who did drop out this year was really high, because I think a lot of people were really struggling with the heat and trying to get enough fluid and food on board. So, you might have got some things wrong, but you must have got the majority right to be able to get there in such a great time. So well done.
Yeah, and I do feel that if I look and reflect, I think, did I run the perfect race? There were things I could change, and I would change, but actually I feel I got a lot of it right. And for me, for my first 100 miler, to not actually make catastrophic errors with my fueling, which potentially could have happened. Actually, I think I did a good job of it, and I know I've got a really high sweat rate. So for me, it was always about drinking right from the start, getting enough fluid in, getting the salts in, because I know I sweat a lot. So that for me was really important, almost more important than the sort of food, really, because I know how much difference it makes for me.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. It was a great performance, and you should be very proud of yourself. It was great. What about the rest of the year? Have you got other races that you've got planned for this year, or was this your main focus for this second half of the year?
So we did have a multi-stage ultra planned over Christmas, but that's been cancelled. So I have a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, I got invited to run the IAU Global Solidarity 6-hour world race. So it's a virtual race, but we've been selected by the GB team to run for GB. So you go and you run your 6 hours and run as far as you can in 6 hours. So I'm really delighted to have been invited to that. That was based on the selection was based on last year's performances, which actually I didn't feel I'd had a great year last year. So I feel really flattered to have been invited to run for the the GB team, but it's only 3 weeks time, so it's a little bit of a quick turnaround to recover and run well again, but we'll see. So that's kind of my next thing. And then there's not a lot of races going on, so I think for me, through lockdown and the lack of races, it's been about staying fit, staying on top of my base, and just staying injury free, really.
Yeah. Well, we wish you all the best for that 6-hour race and other races that you do in the future, and hopefully we'll get you back on Run to the Hills in another episode as well. So thank you very much, and congratulations on a tremendous win.
Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed hearing from the male winner and the female winner. And it was really interesting just to get their insights into how they find preparing for the race, but also running it, particularly at the sharp end. Now, Edwina, we were quite keen that it wasn't just the winners that we would interview on these podcasts, on these episodes, but it would also be runners throughout the field. And I know that you had a few clients that were doing the race, and one of them, Jeanette Cross, was very happy to be interviewed by you and to have a chat with you. And I think we'd arranged that maybe you could do about 10 minutes or so with her. And then you sent me the file of the interview, and how long did it last?
I don't know what you're complaining about, John. It was a mere few minutes over 10 minutes. To be honest, I didn't have a clue how long it was, but apparently it was over an hour long, our chat. But I think you're going to have to get used to that.
Yeah, it was. So I did have to edit it down, and I think I've got it down to about 7 minutes just to give the sort of the feel of it and the flavour of it. Yeah. We will put it out as a separate interview on our YouTube channel. So if you want to watch the whole hour, then you'll be able to do that early next week. So maybe you could just introduce Jeanette. I know she's a friend at one of your coaching clients. So maybe you could introduce her, and then we'll play the video.
So Jeanette has done lots of the Centurion events for many years now, lots of experience as an ultra runner, and I thought it would be a good idea to have a chat with somebody who didn't finish the race, and how they coped in the conditions, and what happened, and what was their mental strategy before and after the race when they are dealing with a DNF, which I think about 54% of the field didn't finish. So it's really interesting to hear, and actually it's really great to hear how upbeat she is about the race experience and dealing with a DNF.
Excellent. So this is Eddie's interview with Jeanette Cross.
Get you to the start line.
Okay.
Dying to know. So let's get you to the start line of the North Downs Way. What time did you start? Talk us through how you started, and then just talk us through your race, and I'll try not to interrupt.
Okay. Oh, no, feel free to interrupt. So the aim was to start. So there was a staggered start over 2 hours between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m. with little half-hour windows depending on what you kind of expected your finish time to be, so that the field would be spread out. Yeah. So I aimed to start at about 5:30. I think I probably actually started a little bit later than that, maybe 10 minutes late, starting people off at about, 30-second intervals, something like that. So there was a chap in front of me and then a chap behind me. So you start on your own, and either somebody will catch up with you or pass you, or you catch somebody and pass them. But there was something really, it didn't feel like a race start where you didn't have that like whoosh where everybody kind of goes off and it's exciting and everybody's talking and you're queuing for the gates and there's a lot of like excited, nervous chatter. But it still felt like a race because you knew you were going over a start line and it beat. But there was this peace about it as well. So you got to enjoy that sunrise, and you still had the sociability as well, because you were still close enough to people to kind of run along and have a little bit of a chat at a 2 meter distance.
I think a lot of people will like that, because I know a lot of people hate the first part of an ultra where everybody runs off like it's a 10k.
Yeah.
And I don't mean, but I think a lot of women really hate that, because it tends to be the guys that then sprint off, and then we're sort of caught up in it slightly.
Yeah.
And it takes about 10 miles for people to sort of start coming back to you, and sort of all that testosterone to disappear. So in some ways it suits us a bit better in that we can totally run our own race and keep that without that adrenaline. So tell me about the sort of checkpoint etiquette, how that went for you.
You can't fault it. It was about as smooth as it was possible to be. You came to the checkpoint, you went through the little timer funnel, and then you stood in a socially distanced queue where you could then sanitize your hands before you went in. And then there were 3 tables, sometimes 2, but mostly 3 tables set up, all of which had exactly the same on them. So they all had water and Tailwind and Coke or Pepsi, and then little packets of food, variety of food. So you waited until a table became free, went and had to fill up your own bottles. It was like, the first thing I learned at Newlands Corner was take the lids off your bottles before you sanitize your hands, because your hands are really slippy, so it's hard. And then also your bottle tops will taste of hand sanitizer. Get those lids off those bottles before you touch the hand sanitizer. But then you fill up and you've still got that chat with the volunteers. I know a lot of the volunteers said that they were desperate to kind of get in and help like they usually do, or give people a hug or a high five. But you still felt that same support. And then you sanitize your hands on the way out and away you go.
Through your sort of race, how it panned out, what happened. The biggest factor was the heat.
I got to Otford and was starting to think, oh, actually, I'm not feeling as good as I thought I did. But it's just a low patch. It's just a low patch. And there was a crew point, I think, at Otford, because a very nice man gave me a Calippo, for which I will love him forever. It was his last one too, so I was lucky that I'd overtaken a guy. That was the only thought that was in my head when he gave me. He held up the box of Calippos and he went, "It's my last one," and I was thinking, so pleased I went past the guy with the sticks, because now I got the Calippo to eat up. There's a very steep hill out of Otford, so that was really, really nice. Yeah. It was nice to have something really cold. And then, it started to fall apart a little bit. And just in terms of I knew I wasn't moving quite as well as I'd like to have been. I was still running. So I was doing little jogs, hiking up the hills. And then I just thought, there came a point I'd hiked up a hill and I thought, right, time to start running again now, Jeanette. No naughty walking, come on. And it just wasn't there. And I thought, right, okay, hike to this tree and then run. And then I just thought, right, okay, I'm gonna hike. And then I started doing the maths in my head. It's like, you can walk this. Yeah. You can walk it out, power it through, and then maybe a little bit later you'll feel a little bit better. So I did literally walk to Rootham. But I was so zen about the whole thing. It was just like, just walk until either somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, "Sorry, Jeanette, time's up," or walk until you finish.
So how are you feeling now? It's Monday morning. How's the body feeling? How's the mind feeling about that decision?
I think, because right back when we were talking earlier, and I said that going back to North Downs Way 100 this year was my way of dealing with the fact that I felt like I'd quit in 2017 at Detling when I really didn't need to. Whereas this time, even at the time in 2017, after I'd handed my number over, I was like, oh no, really, you shouldn't have done that. This time, I know that it was the right decision completely. So I've not had any of those what if I'd kept going? What if I'd, nothing. I've had none of that because I'm just totally zen about it. Yeah. Which is good, because I'd hate to have kind of gotten home and then gone, oh man, you could have just kept going, and not with that feeling that And I think that there's not a feeling with it. I've got an unfinished business with it now, whereas there was before, because I knew that I probably should have kept going last time.
Well, thanks for listening to this first episode of Run to the Hills, and we really hope that you've enjoyed listening and watching this episode. I say we really like your feedback, and one of the things that we'd like to hear from you is just how this episode has gone. We've had 5 different interviews with different people, shorter ones. Is this a format that you like, or would you rather have maybe just 2 interviews that are a bit longer? So please send us your feedback, things that you've liked, things that you'd like to see different. And as I said at the beginning, if you want to contact us, runtothehills@cheercharge.co.uk is our email. Twitter is runtothehillsjk. Instagram is runtothehillsjk. Or leave a comment on the podcast or on the YouTube. And one of the things that we'd like to do as well is to have a competition each week. We won't have one this week, so you've got a week to subscribe to us and contact us so that you know these things. But each week we'll have a competition, and Cheer Charge, who sponsor the podcast and the YouTube, will be providing a prize. So there will be prizes in future weeks, so make sure you tune in and watch the next episodes.
Okay. Next week we have episode 2 of Run to the Hills, and John and I, exciting, actually meet in person, and we get to know each other a bit better. We went for a lovely run around the Scottish Highlands, and we just ask each other some questions so you can learn a little bit more about your hosts, not just hear us rambling on, but a little bit more about our history and where we see the podcast going. So we're looking forward to putting that out next week.
Okay, so once again, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and we look forward to seeing you next week.